Anyway, let's get things going and talk about cloud nirvana. I mean, that's what the cloud is, isn't it? So, you guys, all of you guys, professionals. What does professional mean? Are you all professionals? Yeah, you get paid for it. Right, so you must be professionals. I presume you're interested in the transition from on-premises Exchange, or you're looking for good reasons why you're not going to go to the cloud. That's why you're here, okay? So we'll talk a lot about all the things that you need to figure out, factor into your transition plan. To begin, do you remember Exchange 4.0? Anybody? Yeah, it's good, wasn't it? Especially when you install it on Pentium class systems. That was fun. But the one great thing 4.0 did, a long, long time ago, 19 years ago, is it proved Microsoft's credentials in the enterprise. Because up to that point in time, Microsoft was essentially a desktop company, a PC company, Excel, Word, etc. But then Exchange 4.0 came out, and it was so much better than MS Mail. And people turned around and said, you know what? These guys can actually build enterprise applications. And so, 19 years ago, Exchange 4.0 helped launch Microsoft into the enterprise space. And now Exchange Online is helping prove the same kind of credentials in the cloud. Because email is the easiest workload to move to the cloud. It's the reason why an awful lot of people are moving to the cloud. And it's very successful in the cloud. In short, Exchange is the gateway drug to the cloud. And it's gathering pace, this move. And there's many, many, many influences. Some of it is because of the enormous investment that Microsoft is making in spreading data centers around the world. Recent additions for Office 365 were in Austria, in Vienna, and in Finland. So that's good. I think, too, we've got much better network bandwidth. Generally speaking, I mean, there are some parts of the world where you still can't get a decent bandwidth, but generally speaking, the vast bulk of the world is better connected than ever before. And you've got things like Express Route and stuff like that that are coming in, making it easier to get data over to the cloud. I think then, too, there's no doubt we've had a lot of opportunity to learn about the cloud. And this means that most large corporations now have actually signed up to become one of the over 1 million cloud tenants in Office 365. They may not be using it yet, but they're sniffing at the edges. They're interested. And they're interested because I think, generally speaking within the industry, people are saying, hey, you know what, this works. And the economics work. Now, I tweeted something the other day when Perry Clark talked about this in the Office 365 inside the curtain session. He said that, in his view, a mailbox in Office 365 is always going to be cheaper than it is going to be on premises. And he's actually right, because when you net out all of the costs of delivering something like a 50 gigabyte mailbox and a 100 gigabyte archive and all of the other functionality that's in Office 365, and you compare it to what it would cost you to provide that on-prem, it's a hard case to make that on-prem is going to be cheaper, because it's not. The scale that Microsoft buys hardware at, the scale that they operate at, allows them to get down to a point where a gigabyte of data to them costs a couple of pennies per month to operate, and you can't operate at that kind of scale. I think another important thing is that the SLA performance has generally been excellent. Now, there have been big outages. There's no doubt about that. And by big, I mean well-publicized outages, such as the one last July, when parts of the United States, in particular, were affected. But let me tell you this. Because Office 365 is now so big, that even an outage that might affect 100,000 mailboxes is no more than a little insignificant blip in the overall performance of the service. Generally speaking, and I've been an Office 365 user for the last 4 years, I've received nothing but excellent service. I could not make on-prem Exchange run at the same kind of service level. I couldn't. Simply because updating a DAG member server is so disruptive. Something like that. Simple stuff. And don't get me going about server security updates. You know, they are disruptive. And then, of course, you've got these pundits. Who are these pundits? Anybody know what the word pundit means, where it came from? Huh? Fox News. There's a Republican supporter here. Can we have him removed? He's making jokes. Yeah, okay. That's good. Yeah, I mean, you can tweet that. Yeah, I'll give you that one. Yeah, okay. Now, a pundit is actually a name. It comes from India. It comes from India. It's a wise person. Okay? The pundits. No, it's not Fox News. No, you're right. Anyway, so these wise people have now said that Office 365 is okay. So it's okay. Once you've got approval, your CIOs will be reading about this in the newspapers. And we know how dangerous an article is in the hands of a reckless CIO. Anyway, some news about the current public status. This is frustrating to me. Microsoft won't tell me how many mailboxes they're actually running. It's competitive information. It's confidential. But you know what? They have to tell the SEC how much money they're making out of it. So the only way you can actually go and interpret this, and this is what I do, I've been doing it for the last couple of years, you take the financial run rate, the annual run rate for commercial cloud services, which is right now, according to the Q3 fiscal 15 results, 6.3 billion a year. Now that includes Azure, and it includes dynamic CRM. But I reckon a good chunk of it is Office 365. And then you have to figure out how much an average subscriber is paying for Office 365 per month. And you divide it into that big number. And right now, I figure there's between 80 and 90 million, maybe 100 million. It depends how many academic, free, and school mailboxes are there. But I think there's quite a lot of mailboxes there. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. You guys that are all the on-prem community, you're still in the majority. And you're still going to be in the majority for at least another 2 years. After that, I can't tell. Because a lot of it depends on the velocity that Office 365 maintains. If it keeps on going the way it is, the tipping point could be sooner. On the other hand, if, let's say, Exchange 2016 comes out and is a roaring success from the get-go, you might all migrate overnight and say we're happy campers, then it might take a little bit longer. But the salient facts are that Office 365 is doing extremely well and is accumulating mailboxes at a very significant rate. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Exchange Online itself. Right? And try and identify what's different with on-prem. I'm sure you've heard the fact, often repeated, that Exchange Online and Exchange On-Prem are kissing cousins. Okay? They share the same code base. Yeah, they do. But there's a lot of little if-then-elses in there. Because when you think about it, a massively scalable, multi-tenant environment is very, very different to the kind of on-prem environment you'd run. And Exchange 2013 and Exchange 2016 are going to have to deal with that. Exchange Online, what you get today, let's say if you went and started off Outlook web app today. So you go on, you log on to your tenant. Have a look at the URL. And you probably see tacked on to the end of the URL a little version string. And the version string might just start with 16. Exchange Online is already running code that will be delivered later on this year, because it's always ahead of what you see in the latest cumulative update, right? So it's already running bits of Exchange 2016. And Exchange Online, this is an unpalatable, but you have to accept it fact. Exchange Online will always be feature-rich compared to Exchange on-prem. There are some things that are always going to be only available in the cloud, and we'll talk about that later on. Okay, so that's the current status. In terms of its deployment, it's in data centers around the world, which is fantastic. There are 9 separate regions. Think of 9 regions as 9 enormous Active Directory forests. I'm putting it in on-prem terms. 9 enormous instances of the Exchange directory store, because they have a separate Exchange directory, which is used to hold information used by Exchange. And then there are all these mailboxes and all these DAGs. How many DAGs? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. One piece of data given out the other day, 1.2 million database copies. All right? Each database has 4 copies. You now know how many databases they have. And because Exchange supports 100 databases per DAG, you now have a good idea about how many DAGs they have. And it's a lot. There's some of the figures that have been thrown out. One was given the other day, about 50,000 servers running for Exchange Online. They're the mailbox servers. But as you're all well aware, an infrastructure is not just mailbox. So in fact, the entire infrastructure for Exchange Online is round about roughly 100,000 servers. That's a lot. It's a few little blinking red lights to look at. Thanks be to God, managed availability is there. I bet you thought you'd never hear anybody say that. But the salient fact, and managed availability is absolutely a great example of technology transfer from the cloud to on-prem, because without a managed availability, they couldn't run at this scale. Okay? I mean, I have a whole pile of other pieces, and if you went to the behind the curtain session the other day, you would have learned about them. They have a phenomenal workflow engine. They have a great capacity to go and patch systems, to detect problems, to fix problems. But without managed availability, they wouldn't be able to deal with Exchange. So it is a great, great thing. Now, when you look at it, some of the characteristics of what users get, huge mailboxes. Indeed, the new Office 365 import service that was announced the other day, it's the thing where you put all your PSTs on drive, ship them off to Microsoft data centers and have them ingested into the service. It's a great way to fill up all those big mailboxes. Let's get rid of PSTs for once and for all, please. The most insecure, the most unreliable, the most horrible file format known to man. Please. Thank you. Thank you. You're all very nice. But seriously, this is a good way to do it. Now, if you are doing the Office 365 import service, you are getting rid of PSTs like this, please, 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 direct the import to the archive mailboxes. For one very good reason, and that is you do not want Outlook to suddenly wake up in the morning and say, oh, I've got 100 gig to synchronized. Please let me get on with that for you. This will be a bad thing. Okay? Put them in the archives. What other? Oh yeah, my favorite decision of all time was reached recently when they removed the processing of the deleted items tag out of the MRM policy. And this is a great example of where a decision is taken, I think, to help very small tenants, but it gets in the way of large tenants, large enterprises. Right? What this actually means, if you haven't been following along, is that once an item goes into the deleted items folder, it stays there forever and ever and ever and ever, unless the user decides to go and remove it by emptying the folder. And the reason why this is done is because so many people lost stuff, and there are no backups in Exchange Online. So once stuff in the old way, it was cleared out after 30 days by the deleted item tag in the default MRM policy. It would go into recoverable items. It would stay there for 30 days, and then it would be removed from the database, and that was it. Right? No backups. And if your CIO came down to you or your CEO and said, by the way, I seem to have, in a fit of temper, deleted some email from 2 months ago, and it's gone. I can't find it. That would be it. And that's a bad thing. So they decide, it is a bad thing when you don't have backups at least. So they decided to keep everything there. The interesting thing, though, of course, if you're in a hybrid configuration and you move one of these mailboxes that has a ginormous deleted items folder back to on-prem, what happens? The first night. What happens? MFA wakes up on the on-prem server and said, excuse me, sir, I seem to realize that you have got 100,000 items in your deleted items folder. Let me take care of that for you. And cleans them all out. Now, they're still there. They're still recoverable, and you will have backups on-prem, so that's OK. But it's just kind of interesting that they just go away when you move people back. OK, hybrid connectivity. This is Microsoft's great differentiator. It's a thing that nobody else has, and it's fantastic. The hybrid creates a unified GAL, gives you unified mail flow, and it gives you a unified organization, all created by the hybrid configuration wizard. But the thing about it is, I've got to point out to you, management is not always unified because there are some things that don't flow across the connector. So it's a thing that you have to pay enormous detail to, especially with things like transport rules and, indeed, MRM policies. Because if you make a change on one side, you have to make sure that the change is echoed on the other. Otherwise, you will have different processing occurring in on-prem and in the cloud. I'd also say that hybrid connectivity is really only the start. There's so much more that you have to think about. Because if you really want to have a unified Office 365 environment, you're going to have federation for single sign-on and all that sort of stuff. And you're probably going to be thinking about things like using some of the advanced features that are available in Office 365 that are so much easier in the cloud than they are on-prem, like rights management. So you have to figure that kind of stuff out. I'll also point out that there's AAD Connect coming. This is going to be the preferred tool for helping with hybrid systems because it will facilitate, for example, the synchronization of Office 365 groups back into an on-prem environment. A point I make continually to people is that, sure, Exchange Online is great, but you pay for more than Exchange Online when you buy an Office 365 license. Now, if you want to give Microsoft your money for free, or if you want to give Microsoft too much money for the license, that's OK. But it seems to me that if you are going to transition workload to the cloud, that you owe it to the company, your employers, to look at what else can be done. You're paying for this functionality, so you should at least think about using it. And I'm just pointing out a couple of things here. Clearly, SharePoint Online, pretty good. I use it a lot for document storage. I particularly use OneDrive for Business. I think that's OK. It's got some synchronization issues, but so that's life. I use Skype for Business all the time, but I'm a small tenant, if you will. Some of the larger enterprises still need some functionality that's yet to be delivered. I don't use Yammer because I can communicate quite happily with myself through email. I do use Office Delve because I think it's a fantastic way of finding things that I've forgotten. It is kind of creepy at times that Office Delve is quite so good at finding things that I've forgotten or things that I didn't want to keep. But that's it. But I really think that's good. And then there's this new thing that they've put out, the video portal. Well, a fantastic way of doing internal training videos. You know, it's a fantastic integration between Office 365 and Azure Media Services. And it's so simple and easy to upload videos and make them available to end users, including having those videos discoverable and shown through Delve. So the point I'm making to you is there's a lot more. Don't restrict your horizons to just Exchange. I think it's also important to say that Office 365 is not the same for everybody. I guarantee you that in this room there's probably representatives for tens, maybe hundreds of tenants. And we might all see different things. So there's a couple of things that I'll go through fairly quickly here. First thing is multi-tenant versus dedicated. The largest customers use dedicated tenants. That gives them more control over customization and feature rollout and stuff like that. The vast bulk of us use multi-tenant. We get what Microsoft gives us when Microsoft gives us. There's first release versus standard release. First release, I'm on it because I want to see new functionality early. Okay? You see new functionality anytime 2 to 6 weeks, maybe even 6 months before the general population see it. So I like that. There's E SKUs, SKUs, and P SKUs. E is for enterprise, P is for personal. So P are the small guys, right? E are enterprise. There's a lot more functionality in the enterprise SKUs, but you pay a lot more for it. There's government and academic plans, right? They have their own pricing arrangements, and there are other differences that we're not going to go into here. There are standalone plans like SharePoint Online. Okay, some people think of that as Office Online. There's stuff that's delivered by Microsoft, and there's stuff that's delivered by partners. You know, Microsoft and HP, for example, have got an arrangement that they're going to deliver Office 365 out of HP data centers. Office 365 in China is delivered by a partner. So, you know, there are different places that you're going to get Office 3 for. And then there's the last thing here, flighting and straggling. Flighting is the way Microsoft deploys different versions of a feature out to tenants. So some people might have slightly different versions of code because they've been flighted at different times or they've been flighted a different version. I know this is an interesting use of the word flight. It's a new way to use this verb, but that's just be along with me. Basically, it's a way of distributing code to tenants. So what I see, you see this all the time in the Yammer support groups. See, I don't see this feature, but you see this feature. But we're paying the same and we're on the same plan. It's just simply because when you think about it, with all of these servers, it's impossible to update them all at the same time. You never, ever, ever, ever see a common view of Office 365 across the entire infrastructure. And it's understandable. Just think how long it takes you to deploy a new version of a server product. Now imagine what it's like to do it across millions of servers. And straggling is also in the same bucket because sometimes some servers are overlooked. They have this incredible workflow engine. They have this incredible capability to do automated updates, but sometimes servers are overlooked. And you might connect to a slightly outdated server and see a different view to what I see. So that's kind of interesting. And it's part of just the characteristics, the unique characteristics of running in the cloud. Now, let's talk about everybody's favorite topic. I seem to have been doing migration for most of my career. One of these days, I'll get to where I'm going. Before we go, I think you have to know what you're going to move. I see a lot of people just starting off, oh, we'll move a couple of mailboxes, but there's so much more. Clearly, if you're going to go to Office 365, remember what I said before, it's much more than Exchange. So it's a good idea to think about, well, yeah, I can get mailboxes across, but what about all this other stuff? Am I interested in public folders, moving them across? Am I interested in eliminating public folders, perhaps? Nobody said yes.
Somebody did.
Oh, somebody did.
Yes.
Oh. You want to get rid of them tomorrow?
I did. I lied and told everybody it's not supported.
All right. I don't know if you heard that. This is the new migration technique for public folders. Just lie and tell people they're not supported anymore. They're gone. Okay? Well done. Good one. I'll use that again. Okay. Anyway, there's lots of stuff. Clients tend to be a bit of a problem because you're going to need to use the latest clients. So that means, essentially you're going to have to get up to Outlook 2000, Outlook 2010, Service Pack, whatever it is. Whatever the latest is, use it. That's the general rule. Now, there's various things on the website to tell you exactly what it is at any point in time. But what I'm really pointing out here is that in on-prem world, you have control over clients, much, much, much so. So you can always make sure that you match the server functionality that you're deploying with the client functionality. But remember now, you're not in control of the servers anymore. So as those servers keep on getting updated, you've got to make arrangements that your clients are getting updated. Otherwise, you're in danger of you're going to become out of date and out of support. Browsers are a particular issue, or have been a particular issue over the last year. Chrome, which is a pretty decent browser. Google, in their wisdom, went and deprecated the Show Modal Dialog API last September. Half of OWA stopped working. Half of the Exchange Administration Center stopped working. Half of the Outlook, the Office 365 admin port stopped working. So that wasn't very kind of them. So you have to be able to, I think, really, really, really get yourself in a frame of mind that clients are now going to be updated much, much, much faster than they were before to match what's going on in the service. In terms of the knowledge that you need to go and approach this migration, clearly you need a lot of Office 365 knowledge, but you also need project management. If ever there was a migration that needed solid project management support, it's the move to Office 365. Go get a good project manager, a good technology project manager, one who has some appreciation for what you're going to, and use them to help you get there. It'll be good for you. Switching over, the big bang approach, the one that you do at the weekend, that's fine for small enterprises. Absolutely hopeless for the large guys. You're going to be doing this for months. And that's why hybrid is so important. It's so critical. Prepare for that. Your network, in particular, is going to need some attention. And it's really simple. Think of it. On-prem, where's all your data flowing? It's to your data centers. Especially all the client interaction. It's to your data centers. Office 365, well, you got a couple of things to move first, like mailboxes. And then you want all your users to be able to have really good response time back from the service, especially if you're not only for mailboxes, but also for OneDrive, for SharePoint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an opportunity for you to have a conversation with your network planning team and figure out how you're going to re-architect your network so that instead of being inward focusing, you're outward focusing, especially towards Microsoft, because that's just the way it is. Now, ExpressRoute, the Azure ExpressRoute option, which essentially allows you to have a very fast connection to Office 365, is being upgraded to support Office 365. I think that's a good route to look at, a good thing to look at if you're interested. In terms of migration toolkits, they're improving all the time. Some of the public folders, see me around that, some of the public folder scripts are a bit outdated. If you take them off the Exchange kit, that's a bad idea. Go and get the latest versions that are online. In terms of the commercial toolkits, there's lots of people out there that advertise a capacity, a capability of moving mailboxes and other pieces of data to Office 365. I'm not going to endorse anybody here. But what I will say is test. Go and ask the folks that are down in the exhibition area. Ask them for test versions and go and test them in your environment, and you'll find the best one for you. You know, the ones that, some of them have got great project management capabilities, so you can plan and automate mailbox transitions. Some of them are only Exchange. Some of them will do Exchange and SharePoint. Some of them will also handle Active Directory. So you've really got to go and do some planning and some testing, and also think about cost, because they do vary enormously in cost. Right, so let's pretend that we've got to Office 365. That was quick. That's called a Big Bang migration. It happened just there. Didn't you see the mailboxes go by? Anyway, so my appeal to you, as I said earlier, is that I think you want to start thinking about using more of Office 365. But this is actually an interesting thing, because you have an opportunity to influence how your company deals with information. The classic on-prem environment probably has Exchange, file shares, file servers, that kind of stuff, some other applications out there that you're using. Well, again, you're paying for Office 365, so let's maximize the use of Office 365 by using the features that are there. But that means that you're going to have to rethink how your organization shares information, collaborates, uses documents, shares documents, backs up documents, classifies documents. In short, it's an opportunity to think about the information flow within your organization. And this is the thing, it's a point I've made to several companies that I've been working with. It's also an opportunity to clear up a lot of the sins of the past. Because let's face it, if you're still running a 1990s era file sharing environment and using that for document storage, you probably don't have an earthly chance of being able to resist something like an e-discovery action, right, from an offended third party. So it's time to protect. Anyway, there are some things easier and some things are much harder in the cloud. Easier. Encryption is enormously much easier in the cloud. Well, some forms of encryption. SMIME isn't particularly easier. PGP isn't particularly easier. But if you're interested in things like rights management and OME, the Office 365 message encryption kind of technology, they're enormously easy. It's like click, 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 couple of PowerShell commands, and it's done. And the reason is that Microsoft has done all of the heavy lifting behind it. It's, you know, the kind of thing when you set up AD rights management on-prem, you need a server, maybe a couple of servers. You need about 42 hours to read the documentation. You need a test plan, all the rest. Just do it. 5 minutes, you'll have AAD rights management going. That's really good. SharePoint document libraries and the base functionality are also very easy. Workflow isn't so easy. Dedicated applications that you've built around SharePoint aren't so easy. Skype is very easy, again, because all the heavy lifting is done, except for things like enterprise voice, outside calling, that kind of stuff. And the biggest thing that's easier is flexing capacity. Because when you need to move more mailboxes, you just do them. There's nothing about bringing up new servers and all the rest. That's done. They are bringing on new servers all the time. Hundreds of new servers are added to Office 365 every week. And that's to add capacity for existing tenants and new tenants. The hardest bits are dealing with third-party applications. And in fact, the whole industry, I think, is going through a transformation here, because when you think about it, Exchange, part of the reason why Exchange was very successful in the on-prem world was because we've had this enormously rich ecosystem built up around the product of third-party products that fill in all the gaps that Microsoft left. Now, the essential thing that all those third-party products rely on is access to data. If they don't have access to data, they can't do anything. It's really, really difficult at times to get that data for a third party out of your tenant. So there's a lot of third-party ISVs out there who are figuring out how they're going to deal with the new cloud world. Microsoft is releasing new APIs, and I mean, they've made announcements of a new REST API, which looks very, very promising. It's going to replace Exchange Web Services. But there's a lot of third-party ISVs But essentially, you know, there's still such a lot of data that the ISVs depend on. Things about you know, auditing records and stuff like that, accounting records, they just can't get. So they're dealing with it. And of course, it's also a little bit harder to integrate Exchange online with on-premises software. So if you've got Exchange built into something like workflow, you know, a new user comes into the organization and you set up a new mailbox, you send them a welcome message and all that. It's a little bit harder. Not very much harder, just a little bit. Okay, so we got to the cloud, and now we have to deal with it. This is probably the biggest thing that people struggle with. The cloud today is not the cloud tomorrow. The old ways of developing software are gone, are done, they're dusted, they're not coming back. There's no point in complaining about it. This is just what we have to deal with today until somebody comes up with a better plan. New features are going to appear all the time. The new features are written by Microsoft as a response to customer requests to remain competitive in the market, and so forth and so on. And that's great. They delight users, they dismay administrators at times. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a way. But it's the same everywhere in the cloud. I think a really good example of that is the Exchan apps that have become Outlook for iOS and Outlook for Android. Every 2 weeks, these clients are updated. Every 2 weeks, something different is there. I mean, my gosh, you could be on iTunes all the time. Give me new, give me new, give me new, just to keep up to date. But that's the world we live in. So the challenges, I think, for admins, and I guess most of you are admins in this room. I don't think many users have survived this far. Okay, they probably feel insulted or maligned or something like that, but anyway. So the challenge for us as the admins is to understand the change, to know what's coming before users see it. Really bad idea when a user comes in on Monday morning and sees something and starts ringing, you don't know anything about it. Right? And also then to think about how some of these user features can have some level of administrative control applied to them if required. So these are the challenges we have to deal with. It's all a factor of losing control, because when you're on-prem, you can do anything you like. The servers are under your control, AD is under your control, the clients are under your control, the network is under your control, management isn't under your control, but you get the idea. You have control of everything. And you can tweak stuff, right? You can tweak anything you want. But Office 365 gives you no control. They have a roadmap. It's very clear. They do a good job of publishing it. And that's what you're going to get. Okay? Details, because of some of the flighting stuff and the straggling stuff, can vary from time to time. But essentially what's on the roadmap is what you get. And you can look and see what's coming up, and you can try and figure out what's going to happen. It's also true that Microsoft sometimes makes decisions that you are going to disagree with. I fundamentally disagree with the decision not to clean out the deleted items folder. I think that's stupid. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of an enterprise admin. For somebody who's running a tenant that's serving 20 users and they don't have the time to deal with users telling them that they can't find a deleted message, it's the greatest innovation in the last 20 years. Part of losing control is this ever-changing interface. So because we don't have formal release cycles, okay, you know, with Exchange, you think, okay, there's a cumulative update coming every 13 weeks. Something might change in the UI of OWA at that stage, or even Outlook or whatever. But the UI in Office 365 is in this constant flux. Things are changing all the time underneath it. So you can see stuff happening that is totally unpredictable. And my example here is in January 2015, this year. They were preparing for the new Compliance Center, which is the new area where all of the things about preservation, archiving, retention policies coming. So You know, there were changes that were going to be made to the Exchange Administration Console and also to the Office 365 Administration Console. So all of a sudden, we started to see things like duplicate items showing up in menus. We started to see menu items being missing. I was there a moment ago, and it's gone. That's quite disconcerting when you think about it. You start wondering to yourself, what kind of mind-altering drugs did I have at lunchtime? It was there before lunch, and it's gone. But that's the type of thing. You also saw things like options being grayed out all of a sudden. And this is all because data is being refreshed, and data elements are being refreshed, and UI elements are being refreshed. It just happens. So it's something we have to factor in. Here's some other examples of UI changes. The app launcher came in. Why did the, see this thing here? All the apps. Why did that come in? Simple. It was needed because there wasn't enough space on the bar, the browser bar, to fit all of the options that a user could use. So I think it's a pretty good idea. But boy, you should have seen the hate mail that came out of this. Users hated it. The next one, another hate mail blizzard. The icon for Outlook. Microsoft changed the text underneath it for mail, from Outlook to mail. Everybody thought that was a disaster. You see the type of people we have to work with. I mean, my God. Group notifications. So Office 365, you can like things in Office 365 groups. Now, I'm of an age when like means something specific to me. I'm not into Facebook likes. I'm not into Twitter likes. I ain't any type of likes. But anyway, apparently it's part of being social. I guess I'm not very social, so I don't like them. But anyway, you can like stuff in groups. And then when you like stuff in groups, you get notification that somebody really likes you. And so this popped up. And it wasn't working, of course, because nobody was really using groups. And then they said, oh, well, we got to take that away. So it appeared, was there for about 6 hours, disappeared. Confusion. Distribution groups. You know, in on-prem OWA, you got an option where users can manage their own distribution groups, right? So that option disappeared for a while. That wasn't so good. But essentially, at the end of the day, the point you've got to figure out, if you can't learn to live with cloud cadence, should you be going to the cloud? If your organization can't live with this, should they be going to the cloud? Some examples, too, of fairly major recent new functionality. This new functionality is introduced to first release tenants first, naturally, first release, so they get to see it. However, Microsoft tell you that it's about 2 weeks before general availability occurs. That's not actually true. That's what's on the website. It's not true. And the reason is because once stuff goes into first release, it's an opportunity for Microsoft to experiment with it. It's an opportunity to tweak it. It's an opportunity to see what users like and dislike. And so some things, and Delve is the best example of it, were in first release status for a very long time. For Delve, it was about 6 months. Eventually, they'll say, yep, this is ready. And at that point, new functionality goes into general release, and everybody gets it. Well, everybody gets it if you're on the right plan, because some plans don't have some of this stuff in it. So in the last number of months, I think this is the list since last November, we've had Delve, Office Video, Office 365 Groups, Clutter, and People View. Now, that's a lot of new functionality. That's a lot of new functionality for users to deal with, but it's also a lot of functionality for admins to figure out how they're going to use. So this is the kind of cadence that you're going to have to deal with. Office Delve is an interesting example of what happens. Remember I said it took about 6 months. I think this is a great interface. I think it's a great way to liberate people from information silos that too often exist inside organizations. So I really like it. I think there's some tweaking that could be done with the Office Graph database, especially for Europe, but we'll get to that in another place. But essentially, everything that you do in Office 365 is being tracked, and it goes into the Office Graph database, which is where Delve gets its information from. But you look about some of the things that they had to do over that period. If you were using Delve in first release, you went through all of this. So didn't know about, for example, SharePoint holds. If a document was put on hold, or a document library was put on hold, and a change was made on it, up popped the preservation library in a Delve view. That shouldn't happen because that's a hidden library. Yeah, it wasn't very hidden for you, but there you go. It couldn't cope with any documents that were in groups, private document libraries. They remained invisible, even to people who owned those documents. So that shouldn't happen. Initially, out of the box, it didn't provide any way to hide documents from Delve. You can now do it by making a change to the SharePoint schema for libraries. You can say, no, for example, all of the documents in the HR document library, I don't want them to ever show up in Delve. So that's pretty good. Then boards were added. This is this thing of being able to very quickly set up a collection of documents by pinning them all to a board. It's a nice idea, but there's no administrative controls whatsoever. So you could have 42 different boards with approximately the same name, which doesn't seem to be a good thing, but it's the way it's done. And then you have email attachments were added. So what this means is that if somebody sends you an attachment and you're an Exchange Online mailbox, you use an Exchange Online mailbox, those attachments can be surfaced in Delve. Now, not all attachments will be surfaced. Delve will make a calculation as to which are the most relevant to you and show you them. But here's the kicker. It depends on the messages containing the attachments remaining in the inbox. If you go and refile the document somewhere, and then you say, oh, Delve, that's a very interesting attachment, I'd like to see that, you click on it, you won't see it. That's still an open bug. So I'm not picking on Delve because I think Delve is great. What I'm trying to do here is illustrate the kind of dynamics that you actually see inside the service. These are exposed to end users. Right? So it's not like you're running in a test environment, you figure all this stuff out, make sure it's ready, and then release. This all happens in live time. It's very different. Another example, Office 365 groups. I think this is a great innovation too. It's the first innovation in the area of distribution groups that we've had since dynamic distribution groups were introduced in Exchange 2003. It's the future of distribution groups, so that's good too. But how can I begin? I got very upset when these were introduced. I did. I may have said words that started with F and ended with something else. What do you think I said? Fun. Fun, yeah, there. Fun. There you go, fun. Fun for the Republican Party. And Fox News. I could have said Fox News. Ah, you missed that one, huh? That's a cute play. Yeah, go fast. There you go. Anyway, I may have said words. Shh. So basically, groups leverage a lot of different parts of Office Online. You know, you've got Exchange contributing a shared mailbox and a calendar. You've got OneDrive. You've got OneNote. And you're going to have other stuff going to be put in there. It's really, really, really good. But what I really got upset about was the fact that there was absolutely no management control over groups. Anybody could create a group. Now, I realize that this is a clash between kind of my fuddy-duddy management style, which is where I would like control, because I remember what happened when public folders were introduced, and people forgot. There's probably a few of you in this room who forgot to put any control on the public folder root. Ah, come on, there's a couple of you here. Yeah, there you go, yeah. So what happened when you didn't control the public folder root? Any user could create a public folder. This is the reason why some companies today have 2 million public folders. So I pointed this out to the development engineers that maybe it would be a bad idea to replicate the faults of the past. And I was told, I'm too old, I don't understand. It's the way of the cloud. We're making users collaborate better. And say they're going to be collaborating so much, they'll be creating groups from here to the end of eternity, and then we'll be trying to delete them till the end of eternity. You know? But again, it's an example. It's a clash of the kind of on-prem environment with the cloud environment that you have to get your heads around. It's still, I like them. Now, The next thing we have to discuss is how do you know when any of this stuff changes? Right? Whispery clouds are extraordinarily difficult to stand on or document. TechNet, our friend, your source of wisdom for years. Boy, it struggles with the cloud. You know, the writers are human, and they're like us. They find it difficult to know what's going on, and so you can't depend on TechNet. It really struggles. And you can't take Exchange on-prem content and read it directly into the cloud because of the differences that exist. So that's a health warning. When new features like Delve, our Office 365 groups, our Clutter, our People View are introduced, they're normally introduced with a total lack of documentation. And they're normally introduced with a total lack of advice, or guidance, or whatever. You might get a blog post. Now, I like a lot of the people, some of whom are in this room, who write for blogs.office.com. I do really like you guys. But let's face it, you are marketeers. And you sometimes don't write at the level that technologists require. It would be nice if you did, but you don't. Okay? So a post on the office.com site is not exactly documentation. Anyway, blogs are like dead fish. Why are blogs like dead fish? 3 days, yeah. After 3 days, they're out of date, right? In the cloud, a blog is out of date after 3 days. So you have to bear that in mind. And there are lots of great blogs. MVPs, Microsoft customers, other folk, they go and they write blogs. And it's great, lots of advice. But really, you have to take account of the fact that the time they write something is not necessarily reporting exactly what you see in front of you. And I won't even start talking about all of the troubles of keeping books updated, because it's a right pain. So how do we track change? Well, first thing is, I think that any of you, it'd be very wise that you take a trial domain. Okay? Go and get a test domain in Office 365. And go and only buy a couple of licenses in it, right? But put it into the first release program. You can keep your production domain at standard release, but at least that first release domain will allow you to see what's coming. And it will allow you to play with the stuff. It will allow you to figure out what's happening. It will allow you to prepare for your users. Second place, definitely keep an eye on the Office 365 roadmap. In particular, look at the part that says in development. That gives you advanced warning. Then look at the part saying rolling out. That tells you what should be rolling out to first, the first release people, and then general availability. So you need to keep an eye on that. Definitely look at the Office 365 blog to see all of those, all of the information. You know, it'll give you a heads up. Today, they talked about the new Office 365 import service. So that's a good thing. There are lots of other blogs out there, but remember the health warning. And then here's a good thing. You should be part of the Office 365 Yammer network. I never thought I would say you should be part of and then Yammer network in the same sentence. I really didn't. Anyhow, now that I've purged my soul on that one, I'm sure I'll hear about that one in Twitter later on. Anyway, there is actually a very, very nice group in Yammer called Change Alerts, which is driven by members of the network who have noticed things that are changing in their Office 365 tenant and are bringing it to the notice of others that are there. So that's a great public service, and you should be part of that public service. And then, of course, there's Twitter. Twitter at one stage was called the only reliable indication of service health, because if something went down in Office 365, you found about it quickest in Twitter. I still think Twitter is a very good place to find out what's happening, and you should probably think about that. Okay, something about interfaces. Starting off with how you interact with Office 365. It's important to say that the administration interfaces do occur in different places. You perform tasks through different interfaces. It's sometimes frustrating to see that there are so many different ways of doing it. Microsoft is doing a lot of work to try and bring all those interfaces together, but I think it's inevitable because, let's face it, we're still only a couple of years down this cloud journey. And a lot of the interfaces that we see out there are interfaces that are inherited from the on-premises environment. Look at the Exchange Administration Console, right? So it's going to take time for us to see a truly unified view of Office 365 administration. Just be prepared to do things in different places, okay? Some tools that you can use. Clearly, there's the admin portal, and the Exchange Administration Center should be, that in particular should be very useful to you. There's Azure Active Directory portal, which will figure out stuff about what's been replicated up to Azure. And then there's this Office 365 admin app. I rather like this. I was talking to the program manager of this app the other day. He gave me a bit of a shock, because he came up to me and he said, you know, I want to talk to you about what you've been writing about my application. And I thought I was going to get hit or something like that. I mean, what had I said? And I was frantically thinking, who had I offended in the last 6 months? That was a long list, actually. That was a very long list. Anyhow, we talked a bit, and then I said to him, so how old are you? And he said, 23. And that's when I felt old. Anyway, this is a great app. It's updated every 2 weeks. Okay? So there's new versions of it every 2 weeks. And it is nice to be able to carry around in your pocket, you know, an app that shows you what's happening on the service, what service messages are coming up, and they're adding more and more bits to it. It's still got a way to go, but, you know, this is definitely a thing to track. And then, of course, there's PowerShell. Of course, there's PowerShell. PowerShell always works, and it's great, and you should use it. But it's reduced. Why is it reduced? Well, there's so much stuff that's done behind the scenes that you don't need to get involved with, but there's still a lot of PowerShell there that you can use. It is important that you look at on-prem scripts and test them before attempt to use them in production with Exchange Online, because it's likely that stuff will break. It's very likely that stuff will break. In particular, you're going to have to think about authentication. Things like if you want to send email and stuff like that, think about authentication. The general routine, inside your scripts or inside a PowerShell session, you're going to be connecting to Exchange Online. That's very similar to connecting to PowerShell inside on-prem, because it's remote PowerShell. You remember that PowerShell started off, it just made a connection, direct connection to the server you were on, and then it went to a remote connection. They're using exactly the same technology in Exchange Online. It'll then load all the Exchange commandlets. Note that there are some special commandlets if you want to deal with the Compliance Center. Okay, that's documented online. You may also want to load a set of commandlets to deal with Microsoft Online Services. If you want to deal with licenses, or you want to deal with user accounts, you need those commandlets. And then there are other ones like Azure Active Directory. Okay? In terms of clients, I said latest are strongly recommended. The thing to remember about Outlook Web App is that it is the experimental platform for Exchange Online. New features show up here all the time. Okay? Much so because, or rather, it's much because Outlook just can't change its user interface quickly enough to deal with the new functionality. But they can make changes behind the scenes for Outlook Web App, and bang, there you go. So it's a really nice client now. I didn't really like it when it came out first in Exchange 2013, but I think it's evolved tremendously. I especially like it if you're on a flaky connection, because it's so much less demanding on the network than Outlook is. Interestingly, Outlook is still the most prevalent client used to connect to Exchange Online. And iOS is the most popular mobile client, despite the fact that Android has the market share. It's clear that the mobile client strategy is in flux at the moment. And we were seeing that client, the Outlook for iOS and Outlook for Android client, evolving very quickly. Windows 10 will bring a universal client for Windows Phone. So, you know, it's hard to keep up with time. It is really hard to keep up with time. Now, second most popular thing, we've had migration, let's talk about support. Generally, Office 365 has a very good SLA record, but, you know, things will happen. The DevOps model, which means that the developers actually work on the service, they support the service. So if their code goes bad, they go fix it. Helps, keeps people very focused, but things happen. It's important to say that if you go and look at the service dashboard and you see a red mark against something like Exchange or SharePoint or something like that, that may not necessarily be of any consequence to you. It may affect something in a completely different region. I mean, there might be millions of mailboxes down, but you don't care because you keep on working, right? That's one of the problems I think we've got that Microsoft has got to work on, is to be able to filter all of the signals that they gather, which allow them to know when they have problems. And instead of providing you with a global view of how it is across the entire service, to give you a view of what affects a particular tenant. That would be really nice. I believe they're working on that, so that's good. The dashboard tells you what's going on in any particular incident. But I said to one of the engineers working on this, it would be nice if some of the explanations were in English from time to time, because some of them are written in engineerese, which is a special language used by support people. For you guys, here's one that we had when we were working on the book, just to show you how it happens. I collaborated with Michael van Horenbeek in Belgium and Paul Cunningham in Australia. Paul gets up early because he's in Australia. I don't know, they get up in the middle of the night or something like that. Anyway, 7 a.m. on 7th of April, a week before we closed off the text of the book, Paul sends me a message saying, I can't find any of the files. They've all gone away. This is in our SharePoint document library. That wasn't a good start to the day, as you can imagine. There was absolutely nothing available on Twitter. There was absolutely nothing available on the service dashboard. It just happened. Okay? So that's a very recent example of how things happen. And you know why? Despite the mild panic that we went through, it was just that behind the scenes, somebody was changing a network appliance in a data center. And because that network appliance change was, let's put it like this, slightly screwed up and didn't work, all of a sudden service disappeared to a select group of tenants, including the one we were using. So these things happen. It's just part of life. And this is the detail. Anyway, we don't need to. So support is different. Support is different. Remember, again, you don't have any control about a lot of the stuff that's happening. So here's some advice for you. When you get on the phone and talk to a front-level support person, try and make the experience as pleasant for both of you as you possibly can. Please. They'll appreciate it, and so will you. It's going to be entirely exasperating if you get on the phone with these guys and you don't have details about your environment. Okay? They can't go behind the scenes and start looking up stuff about your data. That's not the way things happen. They're there at the first level to filter, to eliminate the easy cases, to help you understand what's going on so that maybe you'll solve the problem. So prepare. Understand what's happening. And be prepared to give that information to support. Document everything. Document all interactions you have. And understand that it's going to take time to resolve things if they need to escalate. Don't hesitate to ask for a support problem to be escalated. But be fair with these guys. If you go and ask for everything to be escalated, that's not going to be helpful. Ask to escalate if you need escalation, if it's a really important problem. Because you're the only one that understands the full context of the problem. Okay? And do remember to cover all those basics. Anyway. Now, a little thing about reporting. Out of the box, Office 365 gives you basic reports. for many aspects of the service, which is pretty good. There is a very interesting data mart behind the scenes. This is where all of the information is gathered and stored for up to 90 days. Okay? And you can then use it. There's a set of PowerShell commandlets to get information out of it, or you can export stuff to Excel and play around with it and all the rest of it. There's also a group of third parties that do a good job of making sense of it. So if you're interested in grabbing stuff out of the service, go and talk to some of them. And I think some of them, Cogmotive is here. I'm not sure about the other ones here. In terms of monitoring, it's really difficult or impossible to be looking at Office 365 all the time. So I think you probably want to consider some third-party monitoring tools to help you automate the process. And I've mentioned a couple here. Some of these folks are here today. Important, as I said earlier, with the migration tools, test and figure out what's good for you. Now, a lot of people wonder, is Microsoft just going away from on-premises? Is there any benefit whatsoever of this cloud stuff? And actually there is, because there's lots of technology has been transferred from the cloud, specifically in these areas. Lots of automation stuff, lots of easier debugging. MAPI over HTTP is much easier to figure out what's going on rather than RPC over HTTP. There's a lot more administrative flexibility has been built in. Role-based access control, for example. That wouldn't probably exist unless we were going for the cloud. Client flexibility, the fact that OWA can change on a sixpence with new functionality. And even things like the way Auto-Discover has expanded its capabilities over the last couple of years so that it's able to provide back in its XML manifest a complete snapshot of all of the resources that a client is able to have. This has all come as a result of cloud technology. So it's been pretty good. But some features are never going to transition, and here's why. They're either too complex, too costly, too many moving parts, too many things to tweak, or too much inertia in enterprise IT. I don't think that many enterprise IT departments will be capable or would be capable of setting up the kind of environment that's required to drive something like Delve or the Office Graph. You know, nobody's going to pay for the amount of hardware that's used to do the machine learning that's required to figure out how to filter mail messages for clutter. It's just not going to happen. And let's face it, none of us like upgrading stuff, right? I mean, the enterprise IT generally breaks out in boils any time it thinks about an upgrade, right? Whereas in the cloud, everything's being upgraded all the time because it's a constant feedback loop. So for all of these reasons, you are not going to see some things in the cloud or on-premises. You're not going to see those things on-premises. And those things are things like Delve, like Clutter, like PeopleView maybe. Don't know. Maybe the Microsoft guys say, I don't know. But definitely Delve, PeopleView, or Delve, Clutter, and the Office Graph, because they all depend on the Office Graph technology. As we aim towards the finish line here, I think it is important to think about a backout plan. I think it really is, because the cloud may not work for you. It may not work for you. It may be a point, maybe the situation that maybe it'll work for you in 5 years' time, but it won't work for you now. So maybe you think about how you're going, if you do go to Office 365, how are you going to get back out? As it turns out, mailboxes are easy. It's all the other stuff that you move across isn't so easy, because whereas Microsoft is giving you things like the mailbox replication service and the hybrid configuration wizard for Exchange, there's nothing really there for SharePoint or OneDrive or videos or whatever. So before you move, maybe you want to think about what is the backup plan, just in case. I hope you never get to here. And very few people, once they go over to Office 365, want to come back out. But there are going to be situations. So, in closing, there are some keys to success, I think. Clearly, it's good to know what you're getting into. It's good to know how you want to use the service. And you can only do that by figuring out exactly how you use on-premises software today and how you can map that into the cloud. Make the decision to go to the cloud for the right reasons. Don't just go because some sales guy tells you it's $6 a mailbox a month. That is the worst possible reason. Have good business, yes, economic, but also technology and business-centric reasons for going to the cloud, and you'll be okay. I said earlier, solid project management is important. I'll repeat it again. Solid project management gets you to the cloud successfully. Don't underestimate the migration effort because it's the detail that catches you. Moving mailboxes is easy. It's all the detail around it, like making sure that users have the right clients. That's the kind of thing. Move workload at a rate that's acceptable for the company. You know, some parts of the company might be more amenable to change than others. They're great candidates to go first. And remember, by the way, the old thing that we've done for years and years with on-premises migrations, always move delegates together. Right? If somebody has got delegated access to a mailbox, they go with that mailbox. Don't try and do cross-premises delegation. Don't try it. Something will break. It may not break immediately, but you can be guaranteed it will break over time, and you'll be responsible. So, after all of that, it was quite a quick run through. I really think Office 365 is on a roll. It's got tremendous velocity. It's a tremendous service. There's no doubt about that. Exchange is by far the easiest workload to move. And it's the reason why I think Office 365 has that velocity today. And that's pretty good. There's lots of potential once you're over there. Lots of good stuff happening. But planning is absolutely critical. And with that, and with 1 minute left, I'm done. But there's more. There's more. We have 2 T-shirts to give out. Ask questions. No, we're going to ask questions. Who's first? Who's first? There's a microphone.
I have a question. You said that where there are so many 365 servers, and so any new updates roll out over time, how long before the first update is applied to the last one for a particular build?
Okay, so given that we've got this huge infrastructure, tons and tons and tons of servers, how long does it take to get out an update? So I don't do the updates, and somebody like Vivek Sharma would be better positioned. My observation is that it can take up to a couple of months, depending on the complexity, to get everywhere. I mean, there are some people, Delve is a good example. It went general availability in mid-April. I was talking to a guy today, he still hasn't seen it in his tenant. So it can take a while.
Thank you.
Sir.
So we're in the process right now of integrating the online archiving, and we're going through the hurdle of getting rid of all the PST files.
Good man.
One of the things that we're facing right now is a lot of the people that are using Apple Mail, and they're having inbox files as their archives. Have you ever run across any situations where you've had to try to get those inbox files moved over to the online archiving?
They're inbox files?
It's a .mbox is the extension instead of PST.
It's a different format. Yeah. No, I don't do that. Sorry, no. But you can have a T-shirt. Oh, Brian Shears, the wonderful Exchange development team, tells me that there are books, printed books.
There's still a few printed books at the expo floor.
There are still some printed books at the expo floor for people who would want them. Thank you, Brian. Expo floor. Here we go. Next question. Downstairs.
Is dedicated Office 365 staying or going away?
Oh,
I know you kind of.
Did you have an impression that I worked for Microsoft? As an observer, as an independent observer.
Because if
I
talk
think
to Microsoft, right, they are pushing me towards multi-tenant. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. I would think that there are particular advantages of using a dedicated Office 365 tenant. It's going to cost you more money, but you have more control, specifically about what hardware you're using, what storage you're using, et cetera, and you get what they call the white glove service. You know, people are making sure that your every wishes are taken care of. Whether or not there's a significant advantage in that, you're going to have to tell me. For me, I think a couple of years ago there was great advantage in it. Now, as we've had a really good success rate with the multi-tenant service, I don't know. It's a good question to have a discussion about, but you need context. I don't have enough context.
Okay. Well, at least Microsoft is pushing me towards multi-tenant, saying that dedicated would be deprecated sometime. But to avoid those, surprises for users.
Yeah. So a Microsoft person making this as a bold statement that dedicated Office 365 will be deprecated in the future is an interesting position for them to take.
Right.
I haven't heard that from any of my contacts. But what I suggest you do, because I don't work for Microsoft, is you go down to the expo floor, go to the Office 365 area, and find somebody who can give you an official answer.
Okay.
That's
Can
what I would do.
One more question?
Well, there's lots of people waiting.
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll be going outside in a moment because I'll be going to, they're
What
going to
about
turn me off.
compliance? Like some
Compliance.
international companies, like
Yep,
Germany is very particular. They don't want to give the data outside,
yep,
but we span the same namespace.
yep.
How do you move it to the cloud? Microsoft doesn't have.
So this is a common problem when you got country boundaries and you want to maintain data inside a country. So the Microsoft answer is they're putting data centers out as quickly as possible to try and get around that. For Germany, I guess they have the Austria data center now. That might be helpful. But it's really a thing to sit down with the Microsoft guys in a particular country and figure out what's going to happen. I don't have a great answer for it. And every country is different, and every company is different because, if you were in the pharmaceutical industry, you're going to be under specific regulatory requirements, and you'll be different if you're in the finance industry, if you're working in agriculture or something like that. So it's kind of hard to say. Sorry. See, did you notice me dancing around the answer there? I'm a consultant for years. Sorry, yeah? Here, you can have the last T-shirt.
What about AV and anti-spam?
Thank you. What about?
AV and anti-spam. Great question.
Anti-spam.
Nobody's really talking about that. We're using a third-party software.
All right.
Specific rules set up for different
Yep.
people. Do we lose control of that? Is that pretty much?
Well, if it's a third-party cloud service, you can always keep on route. You can route stuff through that. Yeah, you can keep it. Out of the box, Microsoft is going to give you Exchange Online protection, right? But if you decide that Exchange Online protection isn't for you, then you just route your mail stream through the third-party service, have it cleansed, and have it then be delivered to Office 365. And it'll be as clean as a whistle, and you'll be as happy as a day is long.
What about the other way? Can you configure to email flow from your Exchange tenant through cloud service third party?
Well, it depends on the cloud service, clearly, and it depends whether you're hybrid or pure cloud. Are you hybrid or pure cloud?
No, we're on premise, but
Right. So you're on-prem, so you're probably going to be hybrid eventually.
Yeah.
So in that case, you can configure stuff so it's always going to go back through your on-prem servers. And once it goes to those servers, you can put it whatever way you like.
sure. But when we go totally in cloud, do you have a flexibility so for your email go through?
I don't have a good answer for that straight away. But again, down on the expo floor, you actually have real live engineers. They're the ones wearing the pointy. No, they're not the ones wearing the pointy hats. No, they're great guys down on the floor. I would ask them. Is that fair?
Yeah. No, maybe.
No, it's not fair. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. All right, listen, I'm going to close down now because they're going to get the room ready for the next session. Thank you.